Aaron, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously we've had you on already. Super powerful story. I think it would be helpful if you, reminded the audience of your story last time or introduce your sort of background as well for those who are seeing you for the first time. Yeah, just a quick background of what we sort of covered last time and then we can go from there.
The last episode, we talked a lot about the crash I'd been in, the physical recovery. So if I just give a little background of the story, so if anyone hasn't listened to the first episode, they've got some context. But if you haven't, go and check it out because I think it was pretty powerful actually.
Yes.
So when I was 21, I was in a car crash and I was in the back, and my girlfriend at the time, she was driving, and my best friend, which was also her brother actually, was in the front. And we lost control of the car and we flipped upside down at around 80 miles an hour, hit the lamppost and landed on the roof. And my girlfriend of 6 years was killed on impact, and my best friend of 8 years was also killed on impact, and I broke my back. I was left paralysed from the waist down and was told I would never walk again. Now, there's a lot more to that story. I'm not going to tell you again now. Go check out episode 1 or the first episode of what we did. But I was told I would never walk again, and out of desperation, being just terrified, and being told that it was possible as well, I totally submersed myself into this world of mind over matter, the mind, and the mind can heal the body. And I didn't believe it at all at the time. I thought it was woo-woo, I thought it was crazy, but I was desperate, I was terrified. So I started to get some books and read and meditate and visualize, and I just totally went for it. And the result was I walked out of hospital 12 weeks later, which was incredible. It was absolutely incredible, and the consultants and all the medical professionals called it a miracle, which, by the way, it's not a miracle. Sounds like a miracle, but a miracle is just simply something they don't understand. There's not a scientific explanation for it, so it's named a miracle. But I think one of the things we didn't unpack last time, and it's why you invited me back, is then what happened after. The psychological journey, the mental breakdown, and the recovery from that.
Yeah, I think, that was, again, one of the reasons I invited you back on, because we did cover this, as you say, miracle, but not miracle. And throughout that process, you were so focused on your physical health getting better, right? So, and I think you even quoted one of the doctors, I believe.
Dr. Joe Dispenza. Go check him out. He had a similar journey in the context of he broke his back, was told he'd never walk again. He was a chiropractor at the time. He was actually waved into oncoming traffic when he was on his push bike by a police officer. The police officer made a mistake and waved him into oncoming traffic. And he got obsessed like I did, but he went on to study epigenetics, what did he study? A whole host of sciences anyway. And he's world renowned now, and he's written a couple of really good books, Becoming Supernatural, You Are the Placebo. Anyway, there's more, but go check him out. He's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because once you mentioned him, I think he became present in my mind, and now he's like coming up everywhere all of a sudden. So I'm getting a big calling to check him out. But yeah, you had gone on this journey and you had sort of put your emotional needs on hold for a bit, right? Because you had to get physically fit. That's what you needed. You could not bear life just in the hospital, not being able to move, right? That obviously turned out the way it did, which is fantastic. But then I would guess these emotional needs then came back because they never were truly dealt with, right? So I'd love to hear about your journey with that and that emotional sort of roller coaster you went on.
Yeah, one of the things that was probably the hardest to deal with is there was so much focus on walking again. Because when you're paralyzed, obviously, the goal is, right, let's get you out of the wheelchair and walk. And I also kind of put the grieving to one side. I did and I didn't. So I would do this thing, actually. I don't think I mentioned this last time. I would do this thing where every night I would play this song, and it was called, it's James Blunt, Goodbye My Lover, Goodbye My Friend. Whew, I swear that was written for that moment. I heard it play in the hospital, and of course it just hit me. And then I did this thing, and it was, I think in a way it was a stroke of genius, but it wasn't planned. it just fell into place. Every night I would lay in my bed and I would put in the earphones and I would listen to that song on repeat like 20, 30 times, and I would just cry and cry and cry and cry. And it just came out, and it gave me the space the rest of the time to just focus on my legs. So what I would kind of do is I would sort of literally schedule in 2 hours to grieve, and then the rest of the time ignore it. And that's not a way to deal with it long term, but in that moment it worked because there was so much. But one of the things I never expected was I did the miracle thing, and I walked out of hospital, and it was wonderful. And of course, when you achieve something, there's a massive high to that. So even in the midst of the chaos and the depression and like all of this darkness, there was actually a high, because I walked out of hospital. I'd gone from this real deep low to this almost like mini high. Walking again was a massive thing, obviously. Then I got home, and I actually went to live with my dad because there was too many memories. When I was living with my mum at the time of the crash, and I couldn't go back there. I couldn't handle that yet. So I went to live with my dad, and when I got to my dad's, it was the day after I came out of hospital, and I got up and I went to the toilet and I was brushing my teeth and all the things you do in the morning, and I looked up in the mirror, and it was like a shock. I didn't recognize the person I was looking at. My eyes were just soulless. I was pale, and it was like I physically didn't recognize the person. And what really hit me was like, shit, I don't know who I am. All of a sudden, because it wasn't just about the crash, I was super keen into football. I was playing at a reasonable level. I was never going to go pro, but I was playing at like county level, and that was my life. I played for Sunday leagues, Saturday league, five-a-side teams.
Was that your identity?
That was my identity,
right.
And this is what I'm getting at. I was a mechanic. I did an apprenticeship at Jaguar, so I had a job, and I was also a boyfriend. Then I wasn't. I had all these identities and roles in life, and then all of a sudden I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize who I was. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my life was, and it was empty. And that was the hardest thing of all. And I never saw it coming. And the moment that hit me, it was like a train hitting me. And from that moment, I just went downhill rapidly, psychologically, and emotionally. And that's when I really hit a dark place.
Well, I guess there's also the other aspect as well. It's like you always hear about people aim for something and then they achieve it, and then that also turns them downward, right? So in your case, obviously the only thing on your mind, it wouldn't have been, of course you had this vision of you lacing up football boots and stuff, but ultimately the goal was, right, I just want to walk again and be able to stand on my own feet. So you've achieved that, and then in your mind before, did you think, right, I'm going to get that and then I'll be back on track, or did you still have this feeling of uncertainty?
Honestly, at the time, I was so focused on walking, I didn't think beyond it. And this is the thing, and actually this leads right into, before we started, I said there's something really valuable that I want to share with the listeners. And this is it, and it's the cause of depression and how to handle it permanently. And I want to share an example I read in a book of one of my mentors called Alan C. Walter. Google him and check him out. He's another phenomenal person, got some really great books. And he was talking about depression in one of his books, and he said, imagine this. Imagine you're married, you both got, say, corporate jobs, so you've both got good solid incomes, and you've got this idea, this dream. So you and your wife or your husband have got this idea of having a family, you're going to have children, and then start your own business, and then the business will run itself, be self-sustained. You can go off and travel with your family. So you've got this dream, you've got this vision, this goal. And then imagine one day you come home from work a little bit early and you get this like eerie feeling in your stomach. And when you know something's not right, but you don't know what it is, you just know. And, the door's unlocked, that's strange. So you go in and something doesn't feel right in the house, and you walk upstairs and you hear this laughter coming from the bedroom. And then you open the door and you find your wife in bed with your best friend. And in that moment, everything comes crashing down. Everything implodes. And obviously there's going to be anger and betrayal and, this explosion of emotion. And then, of course, the classic story is, after this initial shock and event happens, some people go off and become workaholics, some become alcoholics, some dive into drugs. Some even fitness, actually. It's like go to the gym obsessively. Like there's some kind of escapism. And then some people might go to therapy or they might not, or they might get some help, and people want to go back and they'll say, oh, well, the cause of depression is your wife or your husband cheated on you. Actually, no. That's the big misleading thing. And this is what I found out, and this was the game changer for me, because I was trying to deal with the crash, I was trying to deal with the grief, I was trying to deal with the fact that I'd lost football. There was a huge part of my life. I'd lost the social aspect, etc., etc. And also, I still had some health troubles. Just because I was walking didn't mean that I was fully fit and healthy either. I was trying to deal with all this stuff, and so I was stuck in depression. And this is what I realized, is that depression isn't because of that moment. That's the catalyst. The real cause of depression is the loss of the dream. It's the loss of the vision. It's the loss of the goal. And that was the game changer, because then what I realized was actually, I don't need to go and heal what happened, although that might actually be an element of it. I'm not saying ignore it. Please don't misunderstand me. But what I am saying is the thing that really trapped me was trying to heal everything that happened and not looking forwards. And then when I realized, actually, if I can learn, who am I now? Because I don't want the same things as I did before. Maybe, if your wife or husband cheated on you, for example, maybe you don't want to be married. That's not your goal anymore. Or maybe you don't want children right now. So maybe that's a different goal. But for me, it was like, and football, I wanted to be a professional footballer. That wasn't my goal anymore. So I had to ask myself some new questions. Who am I now? What is my reason for being here? Or what is my purpose now? What do I really want based on who I am now? And when I started to ask myself those questions, that was when the depression started to lift. Because all of a sudden I had something to look forward to. I wasn't constantly trying to look into the dark and heal. It was like, oh, okay, who am I? What do I want? And let's start working towards that.
Because I guess it's that loss of the future, right, that we sort of cling on to. It's like, it's not, and when again, reflecting on my own sort of past relationships, the reason why it had such a big impact on me, it wasn't actually because of losing the person itself, I don't think, because clearly they weren't meant to be in my life, but it was actually thinking, right, what was the potential of this, or all these ideas that we formed in our head of where it could go. And in your case as well, it seems like at first you had this vision of, okay, I had this vision, I was going to be with this woman, I was going to be playing football, I was going to, whatever it was, right? So is a big part of that also, as well as forming your new identity, is it letting go of your past ideals and wants? And how, that must be quite difficult though, no?
That's really hard. and it depends, I believe anyway, that it depends on what it is you're letting go of, because I'll give you an example. Football was so difficult for me to let go of. And the reason is because I couldn't find anything to replace it with. And I think if you want to let go of something, finding an alternative is often a really great way of letting go of something else. And again, there's a balance. It doesn't mean, okay, well, I'm going to let go of this person in my life because I'm going to go and find someone else. That's not quite how it works, but although maybe that could help. But actually, football was really difficult because it gave me so much. It gave me an outlet. And actually, one of the things, I didn't really fully understand this at the time, but football was probably the only area where I truly felt confident. They call it like being in the zone or being in flow or being fully yourself. I wasn't super confident in my, socially, it was okay. But I didn't have a lot of self-esteem. My job, I was okay. I was pretty good at it, but it was nothing special. I just did it. But in football, I was good, and I knew I was good. So it was the one area in my life where I walked into it with confidence. Whereas everywhere else, I was a little bit unsure, a little bit sort of low self-esteem. And I lost that part. And all of a sudden, there wasn't an area where I was confident.
That is really interesting, because I was reflecting on this the other day, because I remember being sort of picked on at school a lot, and I could never really express myself. And then suddenly I remember thinking, okay, right, what made me more confident? And it was stuff like going to the gym, building a certain physique, because that was part of my... And then I was thinking, when you start to look at it, it's like, what would happen if I suddenly couldn't go to the gym, or I lost my physique, and it starts to get you really questioning your identity. And it's like, how is there, do you think, a danger then to sort of forming your identity based off of different things, or is that not what makes us who we are? I appreciate it's quite a complex idea, but
it's a great conversation. I love opening this up, and so this actually this sent me on a really fascinating journey, and I actually went to Australia not long after this, because once I was fit enough and healthy enough to travel, I decided that I wanted to go traveling and just get out of there. You know, my hometown had so many memories, and I really struggled just being there. I was probably running away at the time, but I framed it as traveling, to be honest. So, and I was in Australia. I was on the East Coast, a little island called Fraser Island, and it's stunning. And it really is. It's like the holiday brochure. It's, you know, white sand and blue sea, and it is absolutely stunning. And I was more depressed then than I'd ever been since the crash happened. And that was the realization. I thought, if I can't be happy here in this stunning moment, in this stunning environment, then I'm not going to be able to be happy anywhere. And that's when I started to comprehend the idea that this is an internal thing. It's not just about what's around me. And that was when I started to deep dive and read books, and like I realized I had to do something to make me happy. And what it led me to, I started reading, it's called Absolute Happiness, was the first book actually, I remember it. And it started to introduce me to this concept of subconscious and the mind, and then it led me on a little bit of a deeper spiritual journey. And one of the big things I remember discovering is like the conceptual answer to who we are, because it's a big question. Most people don't know who they are, and the conceptual answer is we're a set of identities and a set of personalities that we've created in life and been conditioned to. You know, like a classic is you get bullied at school, you become the funny guy, so you start making jokes, people leave you alone because you're funny, and then you latch onto this joker identity. So you become a joker, that's part of who you are. But it's not, it's an identity. And so we're made up of all these identities. So we're a body, obviously, we live in a body. We have a mind which owns these identities. And we have an awareness, a spiritual being, or, you know, however you want to frame that. But there's a different level of awareness. And that idea was really fascinating to me, really fascinating. And then I realized something else, and this I still to this day I find this so fascinating, is that if you adopt the idea of being a spiritual being, you know, some people might believe it, they might not. It doesn't matter. But just play with this for a moment. If you adopt that idea, we're spiritual beings, we're in this body. And you could say, like, being here is a game, the game of life. And then within the game of life, you have different games, like a relationship game, a friend game, a business game. You know, there's millions, sports game, health game. Imagine this, like, if you could start to pick an identity to match the game, and then you start to think consciously. So one of the identities, for example, I trade, my business is in the stock market. I chose an identity of the spiritual millionaire. And I thought, okay, so if I wanted to be successful in that area, in that game, I need an identity to play that game. It's like a football player in the game of football. A rugby player in the game of rugby, like, you know, football player, there's a goalkeeper, a striker, etc. So there's different identities in the game. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Now imagine for a moment, if you take an identity, you build it, you know, and if you wanted to build a footballer, you'd build a Ronaldo mixed with a Messi or something, right? You could literally build a player. And I was thinking with this concept, imagine if you could build an identity, you could build like a successful identity in an area. So what are the characteristics, what are the traits, what does the identity need to know, what does it doesn't know, how does it act, what are its behavior traits, what are its behavior patterns, and all of a sudden we can choose who we operate as in those moments. And I think that, I'm not even sure if this answers your question, but I think that is actually part of the key to winning in life. Is this making sense?
Yeah, so is the idea that you form separate identities for each thing, or are we talking about one whole, right, so you're, okay, Aaron Timms, and then you are this, this, and this, and then on each branch you're thinking about how you form that identity. That's the root of it, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we have natural characteristics that we'll just carry into every identity, because that's part of like our makeup. And it'll be part of our genetic makeup, and it'll be part of like what we've learned from our parents and our conditioning. So I think there'll be generic traits that flow into all of them. But if anyone's listening, and I'd love to ask the listeners this, I wish I could ask them directly one-to-one. each, everyone. Do you act exactly the same when you're with your friends than you do with your parents?
Oh, this is such an interesting one.
Right? So let me ask you, do you act exactly the same in front of your parents or with your parents than you do with, say, like your best mates?
I do now. I do
Awesome.
now.
Okay.
But yeah, there was definitely a period where yeah, you'd have. Oh, I just love this idea so much because yeah, you might be a different person to this person and this person. And I've spoken with some people about this idea, and it was a really interesting debate because he was saying, oh well, I think there's like an art to that, having a different identity with different people. But then I think about I don't know if you ever watch wrestling or
I
news.
used to years and years and years ago.
So Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's the type of guy who would speak exactly the same to whoever it was. It didn't matter if it was his mother, if it was his boss, if it was his friend. All of them he would speak to the same, right? And I always thought there's something so admirable about that. I don't know if there's sort of a right answer, but at the same time, something that didn't feel right with me was like, again, this is what really put me off this whole corporate lifestyle because it's like you're not acting the same way in front of your boss as you are with your mate. And I get there's like a professional setting, like I get that. But when you're a completely different person and your mannerisms are different, you're just losing that connection to yourself. And I always think in society when I am even just back in London, it's so easy to lose part of you because you get tainted by all like society, and then that will form parts of your identity, and so much of it, I guess, is happening on a subconscious level, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key. I mean, obviously, there's some context. You might behave slightly differently with friends than you might your parents because of a little bit of context and respect or whatever it might be. But as a general rule, what most of us tend to do, and now not so much, same with you, I've learned a little bit differently, but acting the same with everyone is like you being fully yourself. And actually, even now, like I do act slightly differently. Like if I'm with my paddle friends, I do act slightly differently than when I'm with my family. But there's some morals and there's some values, there's some characteristics and behaviour traits that echo into every moment.
Yeah.
But I might be a little bit more jokey or playful, more adult jokes with my friends than I would my daughter, obviously.
Of course,
So there's a bit of context to it, but actually, there's a piece of me that echoes into every situation.
Yeah, and that's so important. And that was the big breakthrough I had with relationships as well. It seems obvious now, but it's like you've got to be your authentic self. And I think the moment in the dating space where you withhold some of yourself just to sort of make sure they like you, that's just being very needy. And once you start doing that, then you've lost it already. And that was a big thing I learned was, and you've got to observe yourself over time, right? It's like if you keep on going dates with people and they may work out, they might not, but you've always got to be true to yourself. And if you're just like pretending to be someone else just so you get laid, then I think you just lose your identity, and then you might end up catching feelings for them, and then they're going to work out who you truly are 3 months down the line anyway, right?
Yep.
And so and that really changed the way I think about things. So it's like now I absolutely love it. With my girlfriend, I act the same way in front of her as I do with my best friend and in front of my parents as well. Just be my silly self and that type of thing. I do think there are parts where, okay, I'll always be myself, but naturally it takes time to build trust with someone, and then you're naturally going to open yourself up more.
Yeah.
I think that's something I can resonate with. But yeah, in terms of being the same person, I'm very fortunate though. I don't know. It sounds, you can correct me, but it sounds like your family were quite open and very sort of open-minded based on sort of your sort of stepmother and the stuff you said about her in the last episode. But I'm very thankful because I can be 100% myself in front of my dad and my mum. Don't get me wrong, I've said some things which she might not agree with. Naturally, I think you go through life and naturally you do, I don't want to say you get further apart, but you become more in your own energy. And yeah, you're not scared of sort of showing that, and they might have this vision of you, right? And you might go and do something else, but yeah, I think as long as you stay true to that, there's still going to be a form of acceptance there. And I know it's something my mum has battered with a bit, not massively, but of course the parents always wants the best for their kid, and their vision of what's best is going to be different to what you think is best, right?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one as well. But yeah, it's all done out of love, and I think her attitude now is like, right, just go through. You know, you can maybe give some advice, and then if they take it, it's kind of up to them really, or they might figure out shit by themselves. I wonder then, in your case, what were the steps you took to form that identity? I know you said you were sort of reading up on all these books and ideas and stuff, but how did you choose? Let's say someone is in your shoes as you were back then. What steps do they take then to go, right, this is the identity I want? Because some people might be listening to this and think, I don't know, I mean, and then there can be this cloud, people are just like, oh, I don't know, it's just so overwhelming. Because, where do people start in terms of rebuilding their identity?
God, that's a really great question. And my answer now is different to what I did, because I understand more now. If I was going to go back to sort of that period of my life, I would actually do it differently. I would actually ask myself some simple questions now. I mean, there's the big question, who am I? And I really, really believe that that's the first question to start to answer. And you might not be able to just instantly say, who am I? But you can start to unravel the answer a little bit. Because a lot of people decide they want something because they think they want it. The truth is they don't necessarily want that. They want it because it's a pain point in their life, and they think if they get it, then the pain will ease off. And a classic is money. Everyone wants money. Okay, we want to be rich, or we want more money. And I'm sure that's actually true to a degree. But if you're broke, you want money because you're fed up of being broke. You're fed up of getting stressed and overwhelmed every time the electricity bill comes through the door. That's a pain point. And you want money not because you truly want it. You want it because you're fed up of being broke. Whereas if you're already, say, financially secure, and you decide, you know what, I'm really, really passionate. Actually, a client of mine, I'll give you an example. He is super, super passionate about animals, and he really hates the idea of dog meat trades. And he wants to start like a dog shelter to take in dogs from the dog meat trade. And he obviously needs money for that. That's probably not going to be a business that he can monetize, or even, it might be a non-profit organization or something, but it's going to be very difficult to monetize. He needs his own money to put into that. That's a passion. And that's a different driving force. It's a different reason for wanting money. And both are okay, by the way. I'm not saying one should or shouldn't be. But my point here is that asking yourself the question of who are you, and starting to answer what you really want in life, should come from passion. It should come from desire. It's okay. Like, I'm broke. I want to make money because I'm fed up of being broke. That's totally cool. That's absolutely fine. But it's not going to fulfill you long term. So I would ask myself a simple question. What is it I'm passionate about? And by passionate, it just means, what do I love to do? If you ask yourself that question, okay, let me ask you. I mean, what do you love to do? Just for the sake of loving to do it, not because you have to.
Jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a big one. Yeah, I guess paddle as well.
Yeah.
I guess I could keep on listing off sports, but yeah.
So sports, as a general,
DJing,
as a generalization, if you like. So okay. So what do you want in life? Well, it's clearly something physical. There's a physical outlet. There's probably a physical expression in that. Jiu-jitsu. Why do you love jiu-jitsu? What is it about it you love?
I think for me, it's the fact that it's unpredictable, keeps your ego in check. It challenges you, and it's the state of not knowing what's next, and that it's just the journey, to be honest. It's just like you're continuously finding out new shit, and you're continuously getting better. It's not something you can complete, I suppose.
Nice.
It's just a constant, and that's what keeps you in it. You can't just be like, right, one day you just get it. It's just like, even you have people who are sort of black belts who have said that they keep on learning something new every time they train. So I think that's what keeps me captivated, I suppose.
Wow. See, I love that. Circling back around to your question, how do you help people discover what they want? Well, an area of passion. Start to write down, list what are your areas of passion, and already you've got a place to start to gravitate towards. And then the next step I would be looking at is, how can I give back and contribute? Because I think I think whether people realize it or not, giving back and contributing is like a spiritual need that every one of our soul needs. You know, when we give for the sake of giving on a real deep, on honest, authentic level, there's just something super fulfilling about that. That some of us can't explain. We're just like, I don't know why, it just felt good. It just felt like the right thing. And I really believe there's a balance of and everyone needs to do that in their own capacity. You know, and sometimes it's giving money and time or skills or whatever it might be. There's different ways. You know, so there's a question, you know, what is my passion, or where do I gravitate towards? How can I give back and contribute? And there's another question I think is important, and it might not apply to everyone, but I think is, if you find an area of passion like jiu-jitsu, for example, how could you monetize that? Because you might want to find an area that you're passionate about. You could monetize it, so you could turn it into a business, and you could also find a way to give back. You know, just hypothetically speaking, as an idea, you might start a jiu-jitsu training business, and then you might, if you say you did it in Indonesia, you might be able to bring in some local children and give free classes. You know, and that ticks the box of passion, monetizing. You get to live. You get to kind of live your dream as a business, if you like, or your pattern, maybe not your dream, but your passion as a business, and you get to give back. And that can just be one area of life, and that actually could even open up the idea of traveling for 6 months while someone else runs it as well. So I think those are the questions to start opening the doors.
Yeah, and I guess it's also, like you said, like thinking about the attributes of why you like it as well. So even if it's not that specific avenue, and again, I don't want to put everything back onto ChatGPT, right? But it is an unlimited. It does have an unlimited capacity to think for you, right? So if you just put in, right, these are the stuff I'm good at, this is the stuff I'm passionate about, try and come up with some sort of, not really a solution, but stuff in which I can put these skills into and that type of thing. And I guess if you don't really have a passion or anything like that that gets you going, I guess just try something, right? Just try anything and see what happens. I guess in your case, you would have tried like lots of different stuff once you sort of came out. Was that your strategy? I know you said you would do something different to what you did back then. So
yeah, for sure. Actually, that's kind of the next point I wanted to lead on to is, I think one of the big mistakes I made for sure, and I see this with a lot of people, when we ask big questions, who am I, what do I want in life, we try and find the answer. And I don't think there is the answer. I think there's a right answer for that moment in life. And you said it, you know, it's a journey, life's a journey. And I think it's really important just to try something. And it may or may not be the thing, but what it will do is it will open doors, it will teach you more about yourself, it might lead to something else. You know, that's how I'm where I am now. You know, with the trading and running the Spiritual Millionaire Club. I had an engineering business because I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to make some money and contribute all this stuff, and it was great for 4 years, and then it nearly killed me. It burned me out, and then I was building a property business at the same time, and that was fun. And at that time, my idea was like, oh, okay, you know, I could give back by providing really nice living accommodation for people on low incomes. And at the time, it was, it was a great idea. It was like a mission. I felt like I could give back, and it didn't work out that way. But what it did do is teach me more about myself, and that's what led me to the trading. I met someone in the property world. You know, the story goes on, but the point is it's like it was a journey that's unraveled itself and still is now.
Yeah, and it's through these different experiences. Like you said, you might meet someone who then introduces you to someone, and I think that's just living.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think not putting too much pressure on the outcome. Okay, like this is going to be the thing, this is going to be the thing. I think, like you said, it changes. And I spoke about this with Rocco, another guest on the podcast. Very interesting story of how, he hit sort of rock bottom and then sort of worked his way back up. And I remember we were discussing how, different periods of your life can entail different things, right? Just because you're doing this for a period doesn't mean this is your identity for your whole life. I mean, how different are even you from like 5 years ago, right? I guess we're just constantly changing, and I think just sort of letting go of this expectation. And how many times do you see people just have a complete career change at 30 or 5? It doesn't really matter when, but I think just relieving that pressure on trying to find your thing, it would be super important.
Massive. And actually, you've just stumbled on something really important there. I think we touched on the compound effect last time, and we were saying, little steps and consistency, keep going. And there's absolute gold in that. That's very true. But equally, we can get so attached to an identity and so locked into it. People are almost, I think some people can be afraid of change. And one of the big reasons is because if they, a classic is, say you've got a career in medicine. And actually, I know a very good friend of mine that's done this. They had a career in medicine, quite a highly qualified doctor practicing in America. And then they discovered the idea of alternative medicines and energy healing and lots of different, healing through foods. And they decided to have a career change. And I absolutely admire this person so much for this, because say you had a medical career, you could get so locked into the idea of that's how medicine works, that's how the body heals. The body is a science and a chemistry-based science, and people get so entangled in that identity, they're afraid to change because subconsciously, by changing, they're saying, I lived a false life, or I was living a life that wasn't correct, or what I believed in is not true. And that may or may not be right. But the idea of that frightens people. And actually, what is really sad, and I see this with people I know, they're almost too afraid to consciously admit that they're living a life that's unhappy, so they keep living it in denial and trying to be happy.
Probably same thing with a relationship, right?
Sure, absolutely. Jobs, relationships, careers, all sorts of things. And I think, what you just said there is so powerful, because actually sometimes we just have to stop and say, this was really cool 5 years ago, and I did enjoy it 5 years ago, and that's what I did believe. Now I've got new knowledge. Now I know a little bit more about myself. Now I understand life a little bit more, and actually this doesn't serve me anymore. Bye. And it can be a people. It can be a person or a business.
But I wonder how people can cultivate that awareness, because when you're so stuck in that vision and routine, how do you even become aware of that? I know for a lot of people it was COVID, because you had that chance to stop and really reflect. But when a pandemic doesn't happen, how do you become aware? And I think as I think we've discussed before, there are some plant medicine experiences and all this other stuff, right? But how can people get that awareness or consciousness of, okay, right, it's time to switch it up? Because when you're stuck in it, you're stuck in it. You don't know what you don't know, right?
For sure. And it's a great question, and I don't think there's actually an answer to that question. For a lot of people, they get the wake-up call. For me, it was the crash. For some people, it can be a health scare. Some people, it can be their business goes bankrupt overnight. They get to wake up. You need the wake-up call. That's one of the famous things Joe Dispenza says. And, if people get that wake-up call, that can be a blessing in disguise. And although there's lots of things I wish didn't happen about the crash, that's one of the things I'm genuinely grateful for. It was like a massive pattern breaker. It just came in like a massive axe and chopped my life in half. And all of a sudden, I was on a different direction. Not everyone gets that, or maybe they get it in a more subtle way. I mean, my guess is if you're listening to this podcast already, you desire change. There's something in you that's searching for something more, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Right.
But what I would say to people, though, is feel, because if you're not happy, if you're feeling a heaviness, a sadness, or an anger, or something in an area of life, that there's a need for change. So if there's not that big wake-up call, there's not that axe that comes down and chops life in half, then feel into your life. Be honest with yourself.
And is that, because I was speaking to my friend Yuri, who came on the pod as well, he was saying actually just take time to just be, whether it's sort of meditation, and he explained how meditation itself doesn't need to be fucking complicated, just sit there and just observe your thoughts that come up. And I think, perhaps that's something people can do, is just, right, just sit a sec. Don't, reach out for the phone or the numbing stuff. Just kind of sit there and really explore that part of you and actually just let your mind wander a bit. I think that's super important because I don't think a lot of people want to do that. It's always like, yeah, okay, right, let's do something else. And they might not even be aware that it's there. But then I think just sitting, that's the beautiful thing I sort of realized as well, even just speaking with people. It's not about, I think when people think about meditation, they think, right, it's about being Zen or it's about calmness. But actually, I think it's so much more than that. It's about discovering what's actually going on and discovering your state of being, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a meditative process. I play paddle tennis, and that's a meditative process for me. And the reason that I view it like that is because meditation is about being present, and being present is about being in your body. Your mind can be in the future, your mind can be in the past, your mind can be everywhere. It usually is for most of us. It's kind of fragmented all over the place. Our body cannot be anywhere but present. But this is why things like paddle's quite a fast, intense sport. So to connect that as like a meditative process, most people go, "What? That's crazy." But when the ball is flying at you, sometimes at your face, but I mean it can be flying at your feet, whatever. When the ball's flying at you, trust me, you're present.
Yeah.
When you're playing the shots, you're really present, and actually. That's one of the things I love about it is it gets me present, and people can do art, they can play different sports. There's lots of different things we can do for that.
Yeah, and again, that's why I love jiu-jitsu, because you have to be present.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to understand what the technique is.
It's going to hurt a lot if you're not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can't be thinking about, yesterday. You're going to be, a bit flat. I wonder, in your case, so you're forming this new identity, right? But I can imagine at the time losing a girlfriend of 6 years is just like I can't even fathom that. Obviously devastating, and you're building this new life. But how do you? And again, it's quite a personal question, so feel free to answer it or however you like. But how do you let go of then that sort of idea you had, or how do you let go when you've had such a strong connection? Is it? I mean, how do you sort of move past that? And obviously now you've built this amazing new life, right, with wonderful wife and daughter. How did you sort of let go of that without sort of neglecting those emotions?
It's a great question. I mean, at the time I didn't know how to cope, and in terms of letting go of the relationship, because she had died, that was like, it was obvious it was gone. So the relationship, the idea of letting go was obviously easy because it was a death, it wasn't a breakup. But the emotion of that, I carried for a long time. And I mean, to be honest, to start with, I just distracted. And it started off, the first distraction was the walking again in hospital. Then when I came out, life was empty. Then it was like going out and I started drinking. Then I started taking some drugs, and I started justifying it as like, I'm young and, I nearly died, I want to have some fun. And, the mind is a master at justifying and rationalizing how these ideas are okay. It's a master at it. It convinces us, like ourselves. My own mind convinced me of all sorts of things that were okay, but they weren't really. So I went through quite a long period of sort of working a lot. So I was kind of, that work hard, play hard mentality. I had that. I was working a lot. I was playing hard, and I was just constantly busy. And then it got to the point of burnout, because of course then what happens? I was pushing all of the emotion down, right. And then what would happen is I would have these eruptions, these meltdowns. So I went through a long period of time, and it was a really awful period of life, to be honest, because I would throw myself into work. That was stressful. It took a lot of energy, physically, mentally, emotionally. Then at the weekends, I would just party hard, which was exhausting in itself. And not even fun, actually. I mean, there was moments when we had fun, but looking back, it wasn't really fun. It was I don't know how to describe it, a playful way to escape. Maybe I could describe it like that.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, we had some fun times, of course, but actually, I spent my weekends hungover and my weekdays stressed. It wasn't fun, really, to be honest. And then it got to a point of burnout, and I hit kind of like a new low. And that was when I started to confront me a little bit. And that was a long process. And looking back now, if I knew what I knew now and I wanted the most direct route to feeling better and healing, if you want to call it that, and a happier life, is I wouldn't avoid any of it. I would confront it head on, but I would do it at a pace that was manageable. So for some people, it's better to confront it head on and go deep dive. For other people, it's a little bit better to be gentle. For me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I need to confront things head on, but one piece at a time.
That's very interesting, yeah, because again, you hear this sort of instruction, if you like, right, don't push away your emotions, deal with it. But that's actually really awesome what you've just said there, because it makes me think, right, how much should we actually deal with at any one time, right? If you've got, if you're sort of there, you're almost bedridden because you just can't handle the thought of going out, and you've got this and this and this you want to solve. It's like, where do people even start? How do you, are you saying it's different for everyone? Some people might just need to focus on a bit of themselves at a time, or are some people better suited to dealing with the whole thing at once?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the key things is when you feel a certain way, just acknowledge it. Say an anger comes up, and you might not understand the anger, or you might think you understand it. There's probably layers to it, actually. We're complex beings. But when that anger comes up, don't deny it. And you don't always have to do anything with it. Sometimes you might just want to admit to a friend, you know what? You know that classic, how are you today? Yeah, I'm great, mate. How are you? Yeah, great. That's not true.
Yes.
Sometimes it might be, but, reach out to someone. I'm struggling with this anger today. I just want to outburst. I just want to whatever. And even that acknowledgement in itself will start to help the process. And there's different ways to handle different emotions. For me, handling things like anger is always a physical thing. I want to go play paddle. I want to go to the gym. I want that physical let go. That's not the case for everyone, but I think it's really, really, really important to acknowledge it, because there's a few layers to it. How you feel in the moment is one thing. Acknowledge it, deal with it how you, maybe it's go for a coffee with a friend and talk to them. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it is some therapy. Maybe it is some coaching. Maybe it's something more like an official channel, whatever. It doesn't matter, but don't ignore it. That's the key. Never ignore it.
I found that as well, just to be helpful. Just, if I'm sort of out with my girlfriend and I'm just in a bad mood for whatever reason, I don't even know why sometimes, but I'll just say, oh, by the way, I'm just a bit angry, just so you know. And then that was, she's like, okay, great, thanks so much for telling me. So now it's like, that's so much better than just like trying to hide it and be like, oh yeah, we're all good. Fuck off. You know?
That's what happens. We suppress it. Yeah, I'm fine. And then those triggers build up, and then all of a sudden there's an outburst, and everyone's like, why would you behave like that? Because no one has any idea what's going on inside of you, and to a degree, neither do you or I, because we've been pushing it down. And that's a bad idea.
Yeah. So I think that's just help, embracing it. And I'd sometimes find when I'm in that sort of mood, it doesn't even have to be intense, but if I'm like, right, okay, I'm kind of in that space. Don't get me wrong, like, I love to meditate and do some Wim Hof breathing, and that sets me up really well for the day. But when it does catch me during the day, sometimes I just like being in that energy and just honouring that. Obviously, not being rude to people and taking it out on others, but I do think there is a bit of a beauty to just sort of honouring that energy and not pretending everything's okay, right?
I think that's the key. I mean, and actually, to be honest, I think it's truth. Truth is like the key word. How am I feeling today? You might, and like often we don't know. Oh, I'm feeling a bit low. Okay, so how am I feeling? Oh, I'm feeling a bit low. All right, how am I feeling? Actually, that low is frustration. Oh, how am I feeling? Actually, I'm angry. And sometimes we can peel away a little bit and realise we've gone from, I feel a bit, to actually I'm angry or sad or whatever it might be. But when we get to the truth of that, all of a sudden, the truth in itself is a massive release. That the truth will set you free really is true. It just has that sense of relief to it. And also, then the next layer, I think, is understanding it. Where is that anger coming from? And there's different areas to look at here. Sometimes it can be as simple as eating junk food. Or you're not looking after your body, and it's actually not an emotional thing, it's more of a body thing. And there's different elements to that. So, if it's something that's ongoing for you, I would say, right, there's some basic questions you've got to ask yourself. Are you getting good sleep, and have you got a good sleep routine? Are you eating healthy food? You might have the odd junk meal, one or two meals, fine, but as a general rule, are you getting all your nutrition, water, all that stuff? If you've got all that covered, and you genuinely are, then start going into a few layers deeper and start saying, okay, because then you've got the right foundation.
Yeah, you gotta. I think mastering those basics is super important. Although that said, I would kind of get in the habit of, and I now know this isn't always necessary, but I'd get in the habit of always trying to identify why I felt a certain way. So it was like, oh, I'm angry today. Okay, yeah, it's because I got 6 hours and 54 minutes sleep. Yeah, maybe I could have done with half an hour. Or it's like, oh, I had this food yesterday, or I had some chips, and I'll blame it on that. So yeah, again, I suppose it's trying to find that balance between, right, okay, get the basics right, but also I think sometimes that might not necessarily be a reason. I don't know if you agree with that, but sometimes Definitely. I think there's an art to just, right, okay, you're a human, you're angry, cool.
I totally agree. Couldn't agree more.
Okay.
I think if it's a reoccurring thing, and it's very often, and it's the same thing very often, then you've got a pattern. If you've got a pattern, well, you want to address the pattern. But sometimes we just feel the way we feel for a reason we might not ever know. Don't worry about it. Acknowledge it, feel it, move on.
Yeah.
And there's a balance, and we have to find that ourselves.
Yeah, and I guess I was always sort of told, right, you're never actually going to find that balance, but we can just try our best to find it, right? Okay, and then, yeah, I guess, so someone's on sort of this sort of road to recover, if you like, and what were the sort of, were there any sort of big setbacks for you in terms of mental health, you think, that, I don't know, could be worth reflecting on? Because I think a lot of people, they do make a lot of progress, and then what I've seen speaking with people is they'll get like a setback, and then they're like, oh, fuck, like I thought I'd gone past this stage. I remember even that happened to me. I think it must have been, 4 years ago now? But I remember just, you think you've made a lot of progress, and then something will trigger you, or something related to that previous thing. You're like, oh, fuck, and then it's a bit of a setback. And I see it can be very frustrating for people because they think they've made progress, and they have, but they'll get the one setback. How do you deal with that? Because that, I presume, can be very, I don't know if devastating is the right word, but yeah, how do you deal with that?
The way that I see it now is that, I think that sometimes we can fall into an idea of, okay, this happened, we need to heal, then we'll be fine. And that's not how it is, because life is full of setbacks, it is full of knocks, it is full of challenges, it is full of triggers, all of the time. One of the biggest triggers is when we want something and we don't get it. And it can be a really simple thing from a coffee all the way to a big thing, that's the love of our life. And we really want a coffee, we can't get it. It might trigger us a teeny bit, it's a bit irritating, no biggie. All the way to extreme. So there's constant triggers. And I think the idea of trying to get to that harmonious place and live there is a false reality. It's not real. It doesn't exist. And I think the acceptance of that. And one of the things that I do is I'm always working on myself in the context of when emotions happen, when things get triggered, I'm finding ways to discharge that. And like you said, sometimes I'm not like, I feel this way, right, I'm just going to go for a coffee, chill for a bit, and then I'm going to get on. And sometimes it doesn't have to be deep. Other times it's like, okay, this triggered me, and it's sat with me for a good few days now. It's still there. I need to handle it. And it's like life is a process. Life is a journey. There is no end goal. There's different achievements and accomplishments along the journey, but there is actually no end goal. And the acceptance of that for me has created a new level of peace. And as a general rule, I'm peaceful nearly all my life now. And obviously, there's days where I'm not happy, but actually, they're only little days here and there. They're not big ups. They're not big downs. It's quite sort of, as an overall, peaceful.
Yeah, I think I think that's what we should be striving for, perhaps, because that's what I've noticed. Like as I've sort of grown through the years, I used to always just love those highs, and you know, like you said, whether it's sort of drinking, drugs, or even just like, it doesn't even have to be with a substance, but it can just be like, oh, I know you've met this woman, or you know, on a night out, or that type of thing. Or I think just those highs, they always just leave room for that. What's the word I'm looking for? A bit of yeah, like an imbalance, I guess, but also just very up and down. And I feel like that, I guess there's a time in our lives where I think we kind of need to go through that. But I think to live your whole life with like ups and downs, it's, again, I just feel like peace is actually what we all want, especially men. I just think we just want stability and that type of thing. And that's what we really sort of look for in life, perhaps.
Definitely, and actually, one of the things that helps me process on a regular basis is a question. And honestly, I kind of want to cringe when I say this, because it sounds really cliche, but it is so true. The idea that things happen to us for a reason and they're there to teach us, because if we go for something and we do get knocked back, you know, we have this fantastic business idea, and this is my passion, and this is my dream. I found it finally, and it's all exciting. We start the business. A year later, it goes bankrupt, and we realise we actually hated it, and it seemed like such a silly idea. Why did I do that? But then actually it's a real knock. It's really hard, and I've done that a few times, by the way, and that feels like a massive setback. But actually, the bigger picture, the reality is like that's a big lesson. So there's a question like, what did I learn? What did it teach me, and how can I be better? What will it avoid happening next time? And those questions are so important, because when we get past that setback, we realise, oh, the blessing. You know, I went into business with two guys in 2018 and lost a lot of money. And at the time, it was really hard to deal with. The failure, the loss of the money, because it was a lot of money, the regret, I was so angry with myself, I was angry with them. It was a really hard knock for me to take. I was embarrassed as well. It was a big ego hit. I promoted this thing and been telling everyone, I dreaded going out in my local town, because people, oh, how's the new business? And then I'd have to tell them, oh yeah, bankrupt. Really embarrassing. I hated it. I used to go out the house thinking, please don't ask me how that bloody business is. But now it's like, honestly, the amount of times I've been approached, would you invest in this? Would you want to partner me in this? And I look at it in a totally different way. And I honestly think that speeding up the process to being where I want to be is a big part of that, is saying no to the wrong opportunities. It's important to take the right ones, but it's equally as important to say no to the wrong ones. And that lesson taught me that, and it's invaluable. I see. And so these setbacks are lessons, and we have to accept that idea and ask ourselves those good questions.
Well, we must do. I mean, it's not only on the mental well-being side of it, but it's just like, if you don't learn from it, then it's going to have a big impact, right?
And it will happen again. If you don't learn from it, it will happen again in a different way. That's the other thing I learned.
Well, yeah.
Because it wasn't the first time I lost money.
That's it.
So the universe has this incredible, I guess it's like a cosmic joke. It will keep happening until you learn.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, idea passed it around, and it's so true. It's just the same things are going to keep on happening, the same temptations, the same everything. But again, I think just the act of just being self-aware and really sort of looking at your actions and seeing what's happened and embracing, like you said, all the sort of setbacks, and really, because that's the only way we can improve, right? It's the only way we can look forward. And I guess from a sort of depression point of view as well, it's, again, I'm sure there's a balance, because I think at first we can be very, very, very hard on ourselves. But then I think there's a point after that where we have to kind of take responsibility for our thoughts and our behaviours, right? No, even in your case, I'm sure it would have been so easy to go, oh, like, why did this happen? And, why did I go into the back of the car when I shouldn't have been, right? But it's like, I think I presume by taking responsibility and be like, you know what, it happened because of me. I'm here now. And I presume taking that responsibility in all aspects of your life has led to you to achieve a better outcome, right? And
Sure.
not taking that responsibility would have left you in a shittier state, I presume.
100%. Yeah, and it's actually really difficult. We can all fall into that victim trap at times, and I do. Even now, there's little moments of it that echo in for me, and sometimes I don't realize it until halfway through that situation. I'm like, oh, how did I get so victimy about this? It's poor me sort of thing, and we do that a lot. Oh, why did this have to happen to me? And but actually, we've got to ask ourselves, what part of that can I take responsibility for? What part of that did I create? The car crash is actually a challenging one because that was a moment, and if I really ask myself that, I have to go more on a spiritual level to answer those questions, because from a more human level, I just got in the back of a car, and then this all happened. So there's maybe a deeper level on that one, but let's go to the business one just as an example. There were mistakes that they made that caused the business to go bankrupt, but I can't blame them because I was the one that decided to go into business with them. I was the one that made that decision and said yes, and I have to honestly ask myself, okay, what part can I take responsibility for, and what part can I do better next time? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? And it's a difficult question to ask and answer. Now sitting here, it's easy. Looking back, it's easy. In the moment, it's a lot more difficult because we do want to blame.
And emotions are involved, right?
Emotions are involved. Emotions are high, but actually, when we're playing a victim role, life happens to us. It doesn't happen for us, and there's a difference. When we're playing a role of responsibility, life happens for us in a way we want it to, and that's a totally different experience of life. And that's the key. And it is hard because sometimes, like the crash, things happen to us that we could argue is out of our control. But there actually is part of that we have to accept too, and maybe on a deeper level we did want that because there was something to learn there spiritually. I don't know. I have my viewpoints on it, but whether I don't know if that's absolutely true or not. But what I do know is that there's always a level of responsibility that we can take larger than the one we're taking.
Well, I guess it would just be responsible for your emotions as well. Just even if something's outside of your control, you're responsible for the way you react to it. So even that is responsibility in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that's sort of a great point to finish on. Yeah. Again, so much wisdom over here. So many interesting conversations. Last time you were here, you gave us a great song suggestion by Tina Turner. So we've got that in the bag, which is awesome. It'd be a bit cheeky of me to ask for another song. But if anything pops into your mind after the show, do please let me know.
For a song?
Yeah.
I tell you who I do love listening to is Bruno Mars.
Okay.
Is it Uptown Funk? Is that the name? Uptown Funk You Up. Yeah, that one.
Is that Bruno Mars, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Oh,
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
It's from a while back.
I'm a terrible dancer, but when that comes on, I can't resist.
But bust it out. Wicked. Love that. And I guess we'll also do something a bit different as well. Yeah, what's one piece of advice you would give to, I guess today we've discussed depression, right? Which is a very important topic. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's going through the shit right now?
Ask for help and be honest, and ask for help from the right people. Actually, we touched on it before, ask for help from someone that you feel is the right person. Maybe they've been through it and they're out the other side, or it could be a professional, but don't do it alone and don't deny. Don't pretend you're okay when you're not, because if you're honest with yourself, hey, you know what, I'm not okay. You know what, I need help. And the moment you do that, you said it, you can't change something you don't know about, right? You said it earlier. Admit it consciously and ask for help, but all of a sudden you know something, then it has to change. And that's the first step. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Something I can relate to as well. I always thought I was responsible for grounding myself, but actually it's okay sometimes to let other people ground you. So even if you do think you've got your shit together, I think that can apply to people at no matter what stage they're at. So yeah, really appreciate it. Aaron, Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Wicked.